Hey, welcome everyone. Wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening, we really appreciate it. And don't forget to share this broadcast once it's posted in my YouTube channel. My name is Joan Jack, and this is Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack and Deadly Cookums and Aunties. And this morning we have three other Deadly Cookums and Aunties with us: Becky Big Canoe, Charm, aka Dr. B, and Roxanne Shuttleworth, who's having internet challenges and will be popping on and off. And this morning we have our guest, Marilyn Jenson. But before we begin, I always start with reading this piece of writing that I think, Marilyn, you'll really enjoy.
Awesome.
An invitation to a brave space. Together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. And we will work on it side by side. That was written by Mickey Scott B. Jones, who's now gone to the spirit world. And I'm going to put it in my notes so I can properly respect and honor her. She's gone to the spirit world, and she created, when I searched her name, she created a program in the United States for young Black girls that's still continuing. So she's left a legacy. And I just loved that piece of writing when it was introduced to me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to you, Marilyn Yarutin Jenson, to introduce yourself, because in our culture, one of the things we all have in common, most of us, I think anyway, Indigenous cultures, is that we don't, unless we pay somebody to do the work for us, like in some of the West Coast big houses, they pay someone to do the work and speak for them and stuff. Generally in a circle, we don't generally do the big, CV, PV thing or whatever that's called and introduce people. We respect that each human being can introduce themselves. While you do that, we're going to mute ourselves so that there's no background static and noise. And then you are just invited into this space, Marilyn, to share what's in your heart and on your mind today. And then again, in the Indigenous way, we're going to go around in turn, sharing with you how what you shared impacted us. And then we're going to see what happens. And then we'll wrap it up, talk about earrings, and that's it. Okay, over to you, Marilyn.
Awesome. Gunas cheese to kachuhan. Yaddleton you hat do a sauk, Ducklawady nahatsati, Tagish ka natasahin, Hitsati. My Tlingit name is Yaddle Tin, and I'm inland Tlingit and Tagish from the Southern Yukon Territory, very close to the community where Joan currently resides up here in the North Country. My ancestry is inland Tlingit, Tagish Kwan on my mother's side. I come from a long line of very, very strong, resilient, beautiful matriarchs. And the woman I most hold up the most dearest is my precious mom, who is now in the spirit world. And everything I am, all of the experiences in my life, the work that I do now is all because of her and her visionary. She was a woman before her time, like back in the 70s when I was growing up. She used to tell me every day, your people are noble, you are smart, you are beautiful. And she used to say, and if this was a long time ago, you would be a Tlingit princess. And I believe her. Hence why my big bold earrings. And just a real, I think, growing up with the understanding that yes, indeed, our people are beautiful and worthy, and we come from such strong ancestors, such strong people. So today I wanted to talk about the work basically that I've been doing for the last 10 years, mainly up here in the north. Just kind of going back a bit, my work that I've done has always been kind of in and around sharing knowledge, specifically, kind of in a workshop format. I worked at Yukon University for a few years in the Indigenous governance program, but mainly I've been teaching people about who we are, and weirdly, like in a non-Indigenous kind of, space. Yukon government of Canada here in the Yukon are, our whole the land claims was really like just the focus for everyone for decades. And so I kind of found myself in this space where, I was teaching about, who we are as a people. And so much of that was just trying to validate, our existence. And believe me, that really got tiring. And speaking of counseling, I remember one day my psychologist said, like, why are you doing that? That's just such a source of, stress. It's really elevating your anxiety. It's just I don't feel like it's a very good space for you to be in. So we kind of shifted the whole thing because we met a lot of racism, a lot of people saying, well, I don't, really like argumentative space where we were constantly trying to validate our existence. So going back, my first degree is in anthropology, and I really wanted to like focus, in that kind of cultural heritage, cultural revitalization domain. And then later I got my master's in Indigenous governance at UVic with Taggy Alfred. Maybe some of you might know him and the
Mhm.
gang.
Yeah.
Where I first really kind of, witnessed like just strong people, like with a voice and all cultural, all speaking their language, everyone just like, like we got to colonize. That's where I first encountered the word decolonization and all of those concepts and things like that. And so when I came back, I started the Kwan dancers, which is also a big focus in my life. Just really based on the idea of holding up our culture, of having a place where we can heal and be strong within ourselves, where we can bring in young people, elders, all of us, into this place where we are just who we are and can be, can exist in that place that is such a source of healing. So all this brings me to 2013, and I was teaching at Yukon College, now Yukon University, in the Indigenous governance program. And I was teaching a class one day, one semester called organizational and community wellness. Of course, all in the Indigenous, frame. And so one day we talked about lateral violence, Indigenous lateral violence. Of course, like all of us, we know what it is. We've experienced it pretty much our whole lives. It's always in and around the community, very impactful, and a negative way. And so, anyway, from that, couple of weeks later, one of the nations here, Kwanlin Dun, they called me up, and because some of my students were people working there, were actual like the executive director, people like in really executive positions. So they called me up and they're like, "Can you come over?" So I went over, and there they had their executive director, they had the chief, they had some elders. They really strategically had themselves ready for this ask they were going to do. And so anyway, I came in and they're like, hi, we have lateral violence in our community. It's a really bad problem. And we recognize it, we own it, we know that it's there, and we're just sick of it. We want to get rid of it. We want to move past that. We want to create a healthier community because we realize that lateral violence creates an extremely unsafe place for us, for our people, and we want to change this. So right out of the gates, I was just blown away by their statement of totally owning that, like this is a problem and we don't like it. So they said, uh, so we want to ask if you can like teach all the staff, starting off with leadership, all 100 of us, the whole First Nation, all of the citizens, all the youth, elders, everyone. We want to learn and be aware of what lateral violence is and then how we can fix it. Can you like do that? And I was like, oh my God, that's a pretty big thing. So I was like, yeah, because something in my heart just really kind of pushed me in that direction where I knew that we have to stop and we have to say take some time. It's not going to go away by itself. This is our problem. There's very specific characteristics that are, there in Indigenous community. This is ours, and no one else is even going to try to fix it for us or feels responsible for it, even though there's many reasons why lateral violence exists due to, colonization and residential school, all of those things. So I jumped in, but I knew it was a big ask, and I asked if I could have someone help me. So of all the crazy things, one of my besties and a person that I worked with in my own nation, even though every cell in my being said, "Don't do it," I worked for my nation for about 14 months because we know I love my people, I love my community, but that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Right? It was very, very hard. And I knew that because my mother was chief from 1988 to 92, and I saw what she went through, like it was just horrible. It was just horrible what a lot of people go through, when they're in those like we call it when they're in the arena, when they're seen, when they're visible by everyone, they become a target. So I knew this wasn't a good idea, but I did it anyway and found out the hard way. But I lasted 14 months. And after that, I just realized my own personal well-being and health was more important than trying to do a dead end job that just wasn't going anywhere. But in the meantime, there was this crazy guy calling from Ottawa, of all places, saying, "Hi, my name is Thomas, and I have an interchange. I'll be in the Yukon. I'd really love to work with you guys." And he kept calling, and I wasn't really paying attention, because everyone calls us all the time. In the First Nation governments or down at the band office, everyone else and their dog, really kind of wanting us to, pay attention to their agenda and not our own. So anyway, he kept calling, and then one day I heard him say, "I can come work for you guys for free." And so I was like, "Okay, come on up." So here showed up like a 6'4" non-Indigenous guy named Thomas to my nation, and it took me about 2.2 seconds to realize I really like this person, and part of it was because he was the only one that listened to me. He was the only one that, actually, was respectful and acknowledged this is a young woman that has something to offer, and, she's saying really important things, but, no one was listening. So anyway, we became really good friends. And so I asked, "Can you help me do this?" And so he said, "Sure." He said, first of all, he said, "Okay, okay, sure. What's lateral violence?" So that's where we really started there. And so over the last, 10 years, this has really become a passion for me and really in my heart, because we've had like over probably 3,000 people. And just so you know, I take the lead in all things Indigenous. That's my focus. I talk about our, inherent ways of being kind, being loving, supportive, acknowledging, holding each other up, because lateral violence is very much the different. It's pushing each other down. It's, not seeing each other. It's not valuing each other. It's trying to hurt each other. Really, it's a projection of our own pain inside us at other people. And unfortunately, the ones who are closest to us. So our own family, our colleagues, our clan members, our community, basically. Um, so it's not a very nice thing, and I know all of you have experienced it, in one way or another, because it's so prevalent in our community, in our Indigenous community, for many reasons, and one of the things I say often is, as we go through our work, when we spend time in communities with people, is we always start off with like, what is it? Like, what the heck is it? Um, because we didn't have language for a long time. We didn't call it anything. It was just this kind of big, dark, cloud, kind of ever present. We all kind of, we know what it is, but we just didn't have the words to say what it was. So I finally heard someone say the words lateral violence about 20 years ago, maybe, and it was my cousin,
Mm,
Geraldine.
mm,
She went to like some kind of healing, or, she was doing some work on herself, when she was down in BC. And so when she came back, she used those words. And I was like, what the heck is that? So,
mm,
the first big thing is we have to be able to name it, and
mm,
take ownership leadership because it is our problem. I heard an elder from NW say, the church is not going to fix this for us. The government's not going to fix it for us. This is ours. And we have to figure this out. We have to figure this out. It's our journey. And I really feel like that's what we've been doing, with the lateral kindness movement. And hence, lateral kindness really is kind of a counter to lateral violence. It's a recognition that our people are inherently loving and kind, and all of our teachings right across Turtle Island, right across the board are we are good to people. We speak good to them, like I always used to hear elders say back in the day, you can't just say any old thing to people, meaning you have to be very intentional with your words and how you talk to people, and what you say and how you make them feel. Very conscientious that my presence and, what I'm putting out at you is impactful both at the individual level and at the community level. And in my culture and like many others, we're extremely group oriented, so it's not just me, Marilyn, out there doing whatever the heck and saying whatever the heck I want to people. It's my whole clan is responsible for me, and I'm a reflection of my mother and her mother and her mother and her mother and her mother. So if I'm out there hurting people all the time, it's not just me that's accountable for that. It's like
Mhm.
it's the whole Duckloady clan and my community of Natasaheen, Carcross, and then ultimately the Daka Tlingit, and then ultimately the whole Tlingit nation. Like I can't just go waltzing into over there into Becky's territory and act any old way to people. Like I can't hurt people. And so this work that we've been doing is really, it's been so amazing because it's not negative. Even though the topic is very painful, and a lot of us feel the hurt from the experience, whether we've been the one doing lateral violence or the target or just witnessing it, because I always, very honestly say I've been in all three of those roles. Like I've done lateral violence to people, I've definitely been a target, and I've seen it like my whole life. It's been in and around me my whole life and very, very painful and hurtful. So lateral violence looks like when people say, you don't belong here, you're not Indian enough, you're not this enough, you're not good enough. It really evokes, I think, that internalized shame that many of us pack around just for the very nature of being Indigenous. It's always that those hurtful feelings of never being good enough, or supported, held up. When people speak to us in a demeaning way, belittling way, like we speak a lot about even the nonverbal ways that people project their own pain. And you may not be aware of this, Joan might, but I do have a famous thing that I act out when I do the work. We do the workshop. It's called lateral violence stink eye. It's that look that you get. I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you, aunties. So you walk into a space just minding your own business, happy, and then you just glance over and someone goes at you, like they just give you that look of like, you're not important. I'm putting you down. I'm, pushing you down with just the way that I look at you, which is a look of, like distaste or whatever it is. So, lateral violence really manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And so over the years, the last 10 years, what we've really, witnessed in our work is so much positive focus on, yeah, this is a problem and it's ours and we don't like it and we don't want to do it anymore. So like let's transform this dynamic into something that is more reflective of us, of who we are, as Indigenous people. Because again, always hear my mom's voice saying our people are beautiful, our people are strong, our people are loving and kind people, and they really are. And so lateral kindness is like calling us, to really shift, or just, to like really decolonized in the way where we're rejecting this imposed behavior pattern onto us. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is, we were literally taught how to be mean at residential school. Like, in fact, Joan, when your husband said something once a long time ago when we first started that resonated so loudly in my soul, and I share
Mm.
it all the time, and in our workshops. I told him that too the last time when I seen you last in Atlan. But he said, we were talking about residential school is, one of the sources of where people's behavior patterns were shifted. And he said, no one tried to protect anyone because we were punished for that. We learned that if we tried to stand up for other people, that we would be the next target, right?
Yeah.
Like whether it was coming from, like the people working there or, other children or whatever else it was. But he said we learned how to be silent.
Mm.
We learned how to just shut down because we
Mhm.
couldn't protect people, and
Yeah.
because everyone will always be like, well, why doesn't anyone do anything about it? Why don't we counter it when it's happening? And largely, there's that, but there's also because we don't even know, for many, many decades, we didn't even know what to call it. So how can you like call something when you don't even have words to say what it, to be able to define what we're talking about? But now we're in the place where, people are very, very aware. We're all aware. We're all kind of on the same page where we're like, yeah, we don't want to do this because we got to stop hurting each other. So how do we move forward now? And so basically, we really promote the idea of what we call loving strength, is that we can't just let it, go, because that's what we have been doing and it doesn't work because it just persists.
Yeah.
So what we don't, what we don't resist persists, right? I think that's a quote from Jung. But anyway, so we learn how to, kind of call things out, but in a good way, where we don't want to further hurt people because people are projecting their hurt already. They're already hurt, they're already feeling shame and everything else. And so we don't want to be like, stop doing that, you're bad, we want to we want to be able to really, identify the behavior that we would like to stop versus the person who we love and we don't want to kick them out because we're a community. We're
Yeah.
Indigenous people. We don't kick people out. We have to move together. So our,
Marilyn,
yeah.
before we move to charm and before you finish, I
Mhm.
wanted to, as sort of whatever the hell role I play here, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the nonverbal lateral violence. And because culturally, like what you were jokingly calling, and I know the difference between giving someone the witchy eye is what one of my sister-in-law calls it, or my mom is like the ice eye. Like if mom looks at you, you're frozen, And
Mhm.
so there's some of that is, I think, healthy in our, I'll just say what I think, healthy
Mhm.
in our cultures, which were, especially I've learned that living out on the land, we have to be aware of, anyway, whatever. I don't want to talk about too much. I'm just asking you, like, I have concern that identifying the witchy eye as, like, people used to always say to me, the elders would come up to me and say to me, oh my goodness, your children are so good at the potlatch, because we had 6 of them. They were like a daycare. They were all like all in a row like little ducklings, and they sat still the whole time. My kids didn't run around crazy because
Mhm.
that's not our way,
Right.
and but this imposition, in my opinion, of outside colonial ideas around the freedom of a child and all this stuff, it's really disrupting our governance.
Mhm.
And so and our children are not learning about the potlatch um,
Mhm.
while they're running around, so
Right.
yes, and so they would say to me, how do you do that? And I would just smile because they knew it was the witchy eye, man. Like my kids, I would
Mm.
just look at them and they would know that the behavior they were exhibiting was not the behavior that was appropriate for this setting. If they're playing
Mhm.
outside, yeah, run around. So
Mhm.
And or even you talk about my husband Brian, like he can talk for hours, but he's known publicly as not a very doesn't speak a lot,
Mhm,
but he speaks volumes with his body language. Like
mhm,
if Brian Jack is not happy with how you're treating him, you will know. Like he
mhm.
does that old Tlingit stick bitch face or whatever thing that Tlingit men are so good at, and he just it's like you cease to exist for him. And I think there's a part of that that can be laterally violent and not good, but it's also about saying the way you're behaving is not appropriate in this space.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And let me use an example because when we do our work, we do a lot of role playing because we really try to create a space where we can be honest, and talk about it, like just talk about it, and kind of talk about the things that people are dealing with, but then act it out, in that place. So, so to me, lateral violence would be more like I walk into a room, there's a whole bunch of our people gathered there, like there's some conference going on, or I'm dancing, like I'm always in the middle, kind of in the middle of the room. I'm seen a lot, which we call it being in the arena, like you're just out there where many people are. And so I'll walk in, and just kind of glance over, and someone I don't even know, and I don't know why, is just glaring me down. And there's just such a look of disdain and hatred in their face. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, and prior to doing this work, that would totally destabilize me for a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
just be like, what did I immediately? Oh, I did something. They're mad at me. Why are they mad at me? It's all my fault. I just own it.
Yeah.
Where what you're talking about is, yeah, if I'm like at the potlatch and I start messing around, and I look up at my mom and she gives me that look, I know that's her discipline. And I know she loves
Mhm.
me. I
Yeah.
know she's not doing that, coming from a place of where she's trying to hurt me. She's trying to protect me. Right?
Mm.
She wants me to, to learn and to grow in this
Mm.
space. And that's our, discipline. Like, so I'm not questioning her love for me. I know she loves me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, kind of in the case of Brian, is that in your guys's community and life, um, people know his communication style. Like the closer we become to people, we start to learn their communication styles. But I'm just
Mm.
talking about like you walk into the
Yeah.
band office, people are like at you.
Yeah.
Or you say something and they're like, or people
Yeah.
throwing things around, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those
Yeah.
nonverbals that are clearly saying, like, you're bothering me,
Yeah.
or I don't
You're
like
no
what you
good.
you're no
Yeah.
good, and
Yeah.
when we're already hurt, like it's more hurtful. Like it just causes more hurt in us. So that's basically what we're
Yeah.
talking about with the nonverbals is,
Yeah, I knew that, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to create that in the space for listeners. And I wanted one more thing, and then we'll let you wrap up, and we'll go on. But in my opinion, lateral violence now across Indian country is being used to silence people, dissenting voices,
yeah,
and that is so undemocratic.
yeah,
You know, it's
absolutely.
like it disgusts me somewhere so not as I don't even know what the adjective is, but something that deep in my soul is so deeply offended that oh we can't like that's so un-indigenous. Like
Yeah,
all of our governance systems are based on what white people call free speech.
right.
Like the big leaders would stand up and make their view known.
Mhm.
And now if you're dissenting with the elected leaders or appointed leaders or any kind of leaders anywhere. Oh, she's so laterally violent.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah.
I'm labeled. That's how
People
I'm
can
labeled.
totally. People can definitely weaponize the terminology lateral violence and use
Mm,
a wrong context, and part of that because like dissent is normal. Like if we imagine, our ancestors a long time ago sitting in council because they had their various ways of coming together and talking things out, working through things. Not everyone, not even like the six of us right now agree 100% of the time on everything. And that's
Mm,
fine. Like, that's normal, but it's how we do it. You know what I
mm,
mean? The
mm,
respectful way that we choose to come together. So if I don't agree with you, Joan, I'm not going to attack you. I'm
mm,
not going to start like working against you, starting rumors, start whispering around over there to charm, about you. That's what lateral violence is. It's when like
mm,
people really kind of like create divisions as well for no
mm,
reason other than like if we don't agree on a process or a methodology, that's totally fine. We just need to do it, be able to work through it in a better way,
mm,
which is with respect, like our ancestors would.
mm,
Like they wouldn't push each other down like that. They would
mm,
respectfully disagree. We agree
mm,
to disagree, and that's okay. But
mm.
you're right, like in our current systems, it becomes such a power maneuver, and
What a power. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of sabotaging and undermining each other, which to me is so sad because imagine how much further we could be if people weren't so busy trying to undermine, important endeavors and programs and things that people are trying to do, instead of just trying to wreck it. Why don't
Yeah.
be a part of it?
Yeah.
You
So
know?
before we move on to charm, is there? We'll come back to you again actually after, but
Sure.
I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's fine. Like, I thank you so much for allowing me to share. I obviously have a lot of passion and care very much about this work. I believe it's kind of just where I landed. And it's part of really what I'm really meant to do. And after all these, the 10 years of doing this and over 3,000 people being in the workshops, our people are beautiful and strong, and it's just the stories they share and their sense of hope and resilience is just incredible, like even through the darkest times, people find their way, and
Yeah.
decide we're going to change. We're not going to do this. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Love you. And you
Love you.
need to teach me how to pronounce your name properly, your Tlingit name. Can you say it, please?
Yadaltin. Yadaltin.
Yadaltin.
Yeah.
Yadaltin. Okay.
Yes.
Yadaltin. Nice. All right, Charm. What you got for us today? I'm going to mute myself now.
All right. Well, Marilyn, thank you so much for opening our meeting today. I was like, wow, that was really something. I made a few notes. I make a few notes and I'm going to kind of jump around a bit because there's a few things I want to mention related to what you talked about. This is such an important topic, and I'm so thrilled that you actually are here today to talk about this. So, just a general comment before I get into anything. One of the issues that's happening, I think, today is that the current milieu globally is about silencing people.
Mhm.
People are trying to stand up for their rights around the world now, whether you're talking about food production or whatever. And the milieu is, if you're a trucker going to Ottawa or you're a farmer in Norway or whatever, if you're speaking up or you're dumping in Norway or France or wherever they were dumping horse dung on the front entrances of the politicians. It's kind of funny, but most people don't know about that. But it's like they're the bad guys and they want to bring out the army because they're dumping dung on some MP's front yard. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's really what's happening right now. It's like any form of dissent is problematic nowadays. So that's just kind of a general thing I think that's going on everywhere. But not to minimize what's happening in our community because I mean I've worked in some communities where you know you're talking to a woman who's living in a house on the reserve and the guy who did something nasty to her walks by her house every day, and I mean that's pretty painful stuff. So anyway, I made a few notes and put a few things in here. I wanted to start off because we're talking about a few different issues. One of them is the main one is the lateral violence, and I wanted to just start by saying that the Native Women's Association of Canada has a blurb that says, "What is lateral violence?" Their definition is that it's a learned behavior as a result of colonialism and patriarchal methods of governing and developing a society. This is a very critical point, and it first of all comes back to um, this, when we talk about this idea of the witchy eye or stink eye or whatever it is, um, you know, there's writers who, when they came to this continent, to Turtle Island, that wrote about the indigenous people, and they thought they had no law, they thought they had no rule, they thought they had no social mores, they thought they had no political system. But the thing is, they couldn't see. They couldn't see what was in front of them. So, for instance, these social mores, like Joan talks about, when you're in the big house or whatever in the ceremony, and the kids know, she gives them the eye, they know there are social controls, but these were not recognizable to the patriarchs who would scream and beat you. That's the patriarchal, I'll scream, I'll beat you, I'm gonna, put you in a cage, whatever. Their way of handling social control looks very different than the indigenous way. And for me, working in the indigenous community, there's a lot of, I could talk for hours about what I've learned from indigenous people. A lot of it through observation of how they do things, and how these social mores that have been there for generations and generations and generations, like what that looks like in everyday life. Because yeah, there's a lot of things that, even the graciousness, when you talk about lateral kindness versus lateral violence, how did we end up in, dealing with what we deal with? Is that the lateral kindness of the indigenous people, when all these colonizers came to Canada, these pioneers and all these people, when they came to Canada, they were a gracious people. They accepted them, they welcomed them, they taught them how to live in the cold. They were treating them with that was, I would say, some kind of lateral kindness. And what they got in return was, lateral violence and a whole lot of other awful stuff. So, I think that's really interesting to think about, is how the principle, I've never heard that term before, but the principle lateral kindness is something that I think is embedded within a traditional Aboriginal way of being in the world, to tell you the honest truth. Although, like I say, I've never heard the term before. And, I laugh when people talk about Taiki. I kind of laugh because there's a few of us that in academia, when he first took over at UVic, when he took over the Indigenous program over there, um, and he was writing his books or whatever, and there was it was kind of refreshing, but there was a certain naivety, because Taiki at the time, when he wrote his first book, the what was it, the manifesto or whatever it was, when he wrote that book, it was kind of like, we just have to turn our back on everybody and go back to the old ways, which, for all intents and purposes, the principle of what he's saying is good. But the fact of the reality, the fact of the matter is that we still have to be adaptable to this new world that we live in, of all these people that came here. So there was, to me, there was always kind of a little chuckle about the naivety of thinking, okay, we're just going to ignore all these people and go back to the old ways, and that's it. Like, you still have to be able to work with all the people that are around you, all the farmers that are over there in that field or whatever they're doing. So, it was just kind of a little chuckle. I really like Taiki, and he's done some really amazing stuff. But anyway, that's just a little personal chuckle I have about him. But so I was talking about the social morality and control, and I wanted to also add two things on here. So Audre Lorde is a feminist activist person, and she says something really important that relates to this conversation and also to some of what you're talking about. She says, whenever the need for some pretense of communication arises, those who profit from our oppression call upon us to share our knowledge with them. And you started talking about teaching others, right? In other words, it is the responsibility of the oppressed to teach the oppressors their mistakes. I am responsible for educating teachers who dismiss my children's culture in school. Black and third world people are expected to educate white people as to our humanity. Women are expected to educate men. Lesbian and gay men are expected to educate the heterosexual world. The oppressors maintain their position and evade responsibility for their own actions. There is a constant drain of energy, which might be better used in redefining ourselves and devising realistic scenarios for altering the present and constructing the future. Now, she also talks about the fact that while we're busy educating these other people, they're distracting us from what we really need to be doing in our community, like how we need to be working to move forward in our own community. Like, educate yourself. You're grown up. You're an adult. Like, take responsibility. Don't expect us to be responsible to educate you on how stupid you are. Like, why don't you just go read some books and go to some communities, go to some ceremonies, meet with some elders, talk with the community, get into the community, meet the people, and find out for yourself. I mean, a lot of what I know, I learned by watching. Like Joan says, the kids come, they learn by watching what's going on instead of running around the room, you know. And for a while, and I think Joan knows about this, for a while, I designed a workshop that kind of related to this, but not specifically to the lateral violence topic. I designed a workshop of going into community, and there was two versions. In one version of the workshop, we took people from every generation, so the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, the 60-year-olds, and each one got to talk about what they saw as the issues in their community, what they think needed to change, and what they would like to do to contribute to that change. And then also thinking about the personal, how do they take care of themselves, the wellness aspects. And then the other workshop was just sort of where we've been and where we're going kind of workshop, right? But both of them had the same kind of flavor of, let's name the issues. In naming them, we take responsibility for them. We acknowledge what they are. We acknowledge what we want to see, the visionary aspect of it, like where do we want to go and how are we going to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really, I mean, I did a few times over in Squamish Nation, but I've done it in a few, because I used to fly out to jobs. I did this in a few of the different reserves. I really wanted to do it with I would love to do this in every Indigenous community in the country, because I found, even for me, like, I'm just a facilitator. I mean, it's their story, it's their issues, it's their whatever, it's their strategies, like all that stuff. But I found it so powerful even to be participating in that process as a facilitator. I mean, it was so incredible. And I just feel like this would be a very powerful way to kind of perforate things like this silencing and all that shit. It would be a way of just perforating through all of that and really help the community move, because I think that this is the whole thing. It's always been, we know what's best for you, just do what you're told, and if you don't do what we're told, we're going to do this and that to you. Whereas when you bring it to the community and they get to own it, everything changes. It all changes. Like, I used to run a circle in the downtown east side for a couple of years, a healing circle. And, this elder, I said to him, because this was when I first started, when I first got out of my master's and I was working in the downtown east side. And I told my elder, I said, I feel like an imposter. Like, I'm, all the Indigenous people down here, like, I'm the one doing it and I don't even look Native and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I felt like a big imposter. He says, yeah, but you're the one that's doing the work. Oh, okay. So it was like, oh, okay. All right. So, that was really an important kind of in my psyche for me to kind of get past the bullshit that's being imposed on me. Pardon, I shouldn't say that. But, so this process of ownership, and what was really powerful also about that circle was that I didn't make any rules. They made the rules. I just opened the door, made sure food was there, and, made sure there was people to do cleanup. But I let them completely own that circle. And we went from, like, it was at Vancouver Native Health. We went from, like, I just had a couple of my clients showing up to, it was like an eye in the storm in the downtown east side. And we used to get 40, 50 people every week. We ended up taking over the boardroom. I ran that circle for 2 years. It was amazing. And as soon as I left the group, somebody else took over. And then she was like bossing everybody around. The group fell apart in a month. But it kind of speaks to when we take ownership of it. I mean, we already know. We know what the issues are. We know what we need. We know, and we can work together on how we're going to move forward. And this also relates to, I actually did a workshop that kind of relates to this, because I worked in I went to school for 15 years and then I worked in academia teaching for 10 years, but altogether I was in the whole academic arena from 94 to 2009 for 15 years straight. My whole life was living and breathing academia as a student and as a teacher and program developer and all that kind of stuff. And I was invited to go to, I'm just going to tell you what it is, because you guys can look this up. The Vancouver General Hospital and UBC Hospital Foundation has this show they do. It's called Me Too. And what it is they focus on stigma. They focus on stigma at different levels of society. And they asked me to come. I mean, it was kind of funny because they wanted to write my speech for me. Well, isn't that real whitey in my language? That was totally whitey. Like, you don't think I can make my own speech, You think you're going to do it for me? But anyway, I said, no, thank you. I'll write my own speech. But anyway, they asked me to come and speak about stigma. So I spoke about stigma as an Indigenous woman with mental health issues, living and breathing within the academic arena for 15 years.
Huh.
And I talked about some of the lateral violence that I experienced. And I talk about how I coped with that. Like what strategies did I, with person with major anxiety and PTSD and all these things, what strategies did I employ to be able to address the lateral violence that was going on around me? So for example, and just to give one example, I won't give too many, but one example was, so I was hired in a department in UBC, and I had a colleague. Now, she had been there many more years than me, but we actually held the same position. We were both program coordinators, and we were both senior lecturers. And the committee that she was on, I had to be at every committee because I was the Indigenous person. You know, you have to be at every committee so the Indigenous voice is on. They would have one or two. I would have to be on every committee. But anyway, she was running this one committee, and I didn't make it to the meeting or something, and she would send me a note, and she'd say, well, where were you? Like somehow or another, I'm accountable to her. We had the same boss, and our positions were, we were both program coordinators, and we were both senior lecturers. But she seemed to think that I should be accountable to her, and that she should be keeping track of when I show up at the meeting. I mean, this is an example of the kind of nonsense that goes on. If you want to talk about lateral violence or stigma or discrimination or whatever it is, this is the kind of things that go on. And I mean, people laughed at me. I said, well, you know, whenever she sent me these emails, I just didn't reply. That was my way of dealing with it. I was like, I'm not even going to respond to that. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response, you know. So in the video, it says Me Too Volume 5, but it's VGH, as I say, it's the VGH. You can look it up.
My guy will find it. My guy will find it, Charm, and put it in the.
So anyway, it's just it's good to look at because it talks about, like, the thing is, you know, and I think it relates to what you do. It's the how do we cope, how do we survive, how do we manage in those kinds of environments effectively. Like, that's the question. How do we do that with this, as you say, lateral kindness? How do we do that? You know. And this one, I mean, I wouldn't say that I was focusing on lateral kindness. I was just focusing on how to survive in the institution all these years. And I could give you 1,000 stories about what it was like being in an institution as an Aboriginal woman, like the nonsense that I went through for 15 years. I mean, I could write a book just about that. And a lot of it is a lot of lateral violence going on there. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that as well, because it's just a good resource in relation to this topic. And I just want to see, there was 2 other things I wanted to mention here. Yeah, no, that was actually it. So those are the main things. And I think, like, the main thing is realizing that change is going to come when we take, it's like being in AA, you know. I'm a member of AA. It's like being in AA, you know. First you got to admit you're an alcoholic, and then maybe you could do something about it. And I think we have to do that within our communities too. Like, we own it. It's our stuff. It's our community. It's our life. It's our whatever. And it's up to us to, like, take ownership, name it, name the beast, whatever it is. And then think about, what do we want? I mean, the visioning, I think, is really critical too. What do we want that to be? What do we want that to look like? And then how the hell are we going to get there? And what kind of commitment do we have? Like, what am I willing to do? What strategies am I actually willing to participate in to get us there? So that, I mean, that's kind of my.
You're awesome.
Well, there you go. There's
okay. Thank you, Charm. We're just going to move straight to Roxanne while you're back. I notice it goes out every once in a while. So would you like to go next, Roxanne?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that sharing. And when I introduce myself and I say I'm a consultant, I left the university.
Oh, she's freezing.
Uh-oh.
Darn it. This is what happens in the real world, where those of us who live in the north or outside of an urban center, the signal glitches.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Oh, you're back now, Roxanne.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Full.
The last the
Okay,
last
so when I left the university, in 2009, I started consulting. And what I did, because I developed courses at the university level and I taught them, I started writing curriculum. And the first curriculum I wrote with my brother was lateral violence. So I'm very, very familiar with this topic and see it all the time. I just wanted to mention we talked about, or what was talked about was the nonverbal. And it's definitely that stink eye, that side eye, that look. And yes, our parents, including my mom, when I was a kid, just had to give me that look, and I'd get myself together and smarten up and behave myself. As well as I think Marilyn mentioned the sigh. you know and it just crush you. It's crushing, soul crushing. The other thing that people don't realize, and it's part of my training, and I do 2 days training on this, is not responding. When you phone somebody and you leave a message for a week and 2 weeks and they just don't respond, and they don't return your calls, and they don't return your emails, that's a form of lateral violence. And a lot of people don't realize that. I was fortunate, my brother and I, when I wrote this curriculum, and I know Joan is familiar with Mama Way, that organization hired us, and we trained every one of their staff over a year, about a year period. But we also trained their youth. They have youth programming and youth groups going on. And that was so beneficial, and it was so satisfying, because their youth, it was eye-opening for them. They didn't realize or know what lateral violence was. And Mama Way, the same directors there, told them, yes, if you see or witness that, call them out. Because that's what I tell people. You need to call it out. You need to ask, did you really mean to look at me like that? What did that sigh mean? Why did you sigh at me? It takes courage, but it also tells people you have to own your behavior. You have to own what you're doing. And to do that, you need to point it out. So these youth at Mama Way, they started pointing people out, and people who had not yet taken the training, because it took a while to train everybody. It's a big organization. And so when the people were coming in for their training, they were like, I've had the youth say I did this and I did that, and I have no idea what they're talking about, because now the youth were calling out their mentors, their staff, on their behaviors and what they were doing. So it was very, and that was successful. That was success. And that was, for us, we could see change happening. But often, and I've gone into some communities here in Manitoba where we trained or did training community-wide, with certain staff, with the youth, high school students and younger, where we went into a community for a week and trained everybody who wanted to be trained, because it's something you can't force unless your staff and your boss says you have to go, right? But when we talk about go and educate yourself, they're not going to do that. They like how they're doing things. They don't even know they need educating. They don't even realize that they're doing something odd or off or wrong or disrespectful. And so it takes time. But that's what I find I do. And then, of course, when I am involved in meetings and I go and I ask, like, who's arranging this? Who's organizing this? And then I'll ask before the meeting. I make it a point to get there early and say, what are the protocols? What's the expectations? Lay it out before we start. What's acceptable in the meeting? What can be said and not said? What behavior You know, are we going to listen respectfully? Are we going to be open to hearing everybody's thoughts and ideas? So when that's done ahead of time, people coming into the meeting aren't surprised or don't need to be called out, don't need to, they're reminded before we even start what is respectful behavior, you know, things like that. So that's just what was going through my mind with Marilyn. Thank you for sharing. And I get it. Like I said, I've been writing curriculum for over 20 years, and often people just don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
Great.
thank you for that.
Yeesh, thank
Thanks,
you.
Roxanne. Okay, Becky.
Wow, thank you so much, Marilyn. That's a really, really great topic to bring up, and it's been interesting to hear from you, Charm and Roxanne. I don't have that academic background, but I too, you know, I can see I've been victim of, and I've been probably perpetrator as well of this type of violence.
Mhm.
You know, it was what I was observing from the time I was a small child. But I was raising my granddaughter here in the community for a little while, and I think about our grandfather teachings, we call them, and they're love, kindness, humility, respect, honesty, truth, and courage. And with her, I thought, well, I got a really nice picture of her, and I got some little stick-on feathers, golden in color. And when she would exemplify any of these kind of values that we carry, she'd get a little sticker on her picture. And I asked the school to, you know, make this school wide for the kids. Show them when they're doing these behaviors that it's good, you know. And I think that like we used to be able to transmit these teachings to our children because the adults kept them close. The adults kept them in the milieu of what life was all about, where the hard work was done and where the fun was, and now we separate ourselves from them for so many hours every day, and they go and get a different kind of education. And so they're not hanging around with the grandparents as much. So, you know, we need to find ways that we can like transmit those values to them throughout their life experience. So that, you know, you could think of little strategies, but it has to start with young children, because it's the young children who get most deeply wounded. And that becomes the trauma, and that becomes the learned behavior, and the thing that they then put out to the world. So that's what I was thinking about. And I think the other thing too is like when the children were closer to our sides throughout their life, they could see that each of us in the community held a certain role, had a certain position. And this chief and council system and the public school system takes that away. You know, you're just another unit in the band roles, and you know, you're no different than anybody else, but actually you should be different. Each of us is different. Like a grandmother is a very vastly different thing than a hunter or a fisherman, right? So and if you want to learn about how your role should develop as you get older, you have to observe, and it's all about the observing. And then when your kids go to school, they observe that authoritarian type of relationship that they have to have with the teacher and the staff. And then in amongst themselves, bullying can take place. And the staff isn't always aware, like, you know, because our signals of communication are so subtle sometimes. A child can come home very wounded when nothing overtly happened to them. But these girls over here ignored her and left her out, you know. So we have to be like cognizant of what it is that they're experiencing to
Mm.
head it off before it gets that bad. It also makes me think about something that I'm working really hard to develop, and I call it the kinship way. And its purpose is to take the best of our Indigenous knowledge in our totem or clan system and extrapolate it to all the people in the world. Because one thing we have so much of is division, and we don't have cohesion or a way to be relative to everything and everyone else, which is, that was the basis of our strength, was our knowledge of our relationships. And it wasn't just us humans, it was our complete family of animals and elements and plants and sky beings, everything. And we have cut ourselves off from that in the main society. It's all about us, the individual, and what did I do, and you know, less about us together. So this kinship way I'm trying to develop and promote is all about looking at our demographics, our age, like Charm was mentioning, how 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, we have different concerns at those stages of life. But if we knew how to conduct ourselves with honor and respect for one another, then we could go into circles of conferring, where the word conference comes from, confer with one another about what are our concerns and how do we address them. So in my development of this thing, I've come upon the number 12 to be the ideal number, and I would take a little time to explain that, so I won't. Just trust me. But then you have 12 groupings, kinship groups. They each have a nice name related to our world and our relatives in the natural world. And then you use that demographic type of division to help people get together and confer about what matters to them. And then you take everything to the head man and the head woman of your kinship group in your locale. So it's kind of like using our Indigenous knowledge to set everybody straight, set everything right, give us a place to be related to others, give us a place to share our opinions and knowledge, give us just like a feeling of belonging, which is something I think a lot of us don't have. Even if we have lived on our reserve all our life, if our past actions and experiences have painted us in a certain way, even if we change, even if we do the hard work to change ourselves, we won't get that recognition because we're stuck in that time when we were acting out a little, drinking, partying, and we have to move past that. We have so many of us still stuck in addiction and doing those behaviors. We can't cast them out. We need all of us. We need all of us to contribute to a better way. So yeah, I really totally appreciate today's topic.
Beautiful.
Thank you all very much.
Beautiful contribution, Becky.
Thank you.
So for my contribution, before we go back to you, Marilyn, to wrap up, and then I'll close, I want to tell a funny story about calling out. So we're in the subway in Selkirk, Manitoba. My cousin Laverne and I were in line, and the non-Indigenous woman behind the thing there looks up, sees us, and her eyes are angry. And I'm at a place where I already realized it could be that she stubbed her toe. I don't know why her eyes are angry, but I'm there to order a sandwich, and I don't want any of that angry in my sandwich, So I look at her and I smile and I say, "Are you mad at me?" And she said, "No." She kind of came to and she said, "No." Her whole demeanor changed. And she said, "Why? Why would you say that?" And I said, "Because you had really angry eyes when you looked at me." "Oh my God, did I? I'm so sorry." And I said, okay, well, let's just make my sandwich now. And so after my cousin said to me, yo, just tells her she's got mad eyes. But often we're not conscious of the nonverbal behavior. I'm including myself in that we're projecting. My poor husband here, I've been talking about him a lot today, but he's one of them. At 31 years we've been married, and he's not sick of me because he's still here. But he often goes around with this look on his face, and I'll be like, "Are you okay?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, why?" And I'm like, "Okay, because you look really angry." And he'd be like, "No, I'm not mad at all." I'm like, "Okay, well, tell your face, because your face is telling me and telling the world that you're mad, eh?" So it's getting that synchronicity even within ourselves of consciousness, responsibility around what we're projecting. And I just did it yesterday in Listers in Whitehorse. Like, the guy comes up to the counter. It's a parts store. It's very male dominated. I'm a woman walking in there to get an order that was, set up for me, and I'm not welcome. None of the body language is welcoming. The guy comes up to the counter, triggers all my, oh my God, nasty stuff going on in my mind in response to his thing. And I just thought, okay, I hear you. Just be quiet. You're here to get the bolts. Just get the bolts. And then once we got near the end, the guy chilled out because we found a solution. And he was so warm, he turned into this great big, like, he was kind of chubby and like big teddy bear, like I would have wanted to hug. And so my ability to be conscious of my own response to how he occurred for me, and that was about me and nothing about him. Like, I don't know, maybe he needed a pee. Like, I don't know why he was miserable. Who cares? But not to engage in that moment has taken a significant amount of work, and just to stay in my own space. And that's the kind of listening to Marilyn, like my big thing for like more than 20 years has been that we have yet to restore our ways, our own ways, whatever they are in 2024, of resolving personal conflict, both in our relationships and internally, you know? And so, because there's no mechanism, there's no structure, there's no way right now, we just basically avoid the conflict. We just pretend it's not happening. And then we internalize that violence, and then we self-medicate through drinking and drugging and eating and gambling and all bunch of stuff. I can check all the boxes. And yeah, I just wish that the lateral kindness movement manifests space for participants to, and I'm sure you just didn't get to this, to create their own structures then. So, because without a structure, like this bottle is the form, and inside I have water. Without the bottle, the water would be all over the place. So it's the same, with lateral kindness. What are the structures that we're going to create in our community that facilitate that flow? Charm talked about some of this, like, what do we do? We're really good at going to circle and talking and talking and talking. And then now we're at a place where I don't even want to go to circle anymore. Like, I've heard it all. Like, I know why so-and-so is upset, but what next is, so I wanted to say that. And then, it went out of my head. There was one more thing. Gee, I wish it would come back. One time I was sitting with Mrs. Nyman. She used to be the oldest wolf in this community. And she taught me a big thing in that moment, because I'm a philosopher. I was listening to her, and she said, it went right through my head, and I got that the knowledge is all out there, and we're the conduit. It comes into our head. We have the experience of the knowledge, and then we share it, eh? But she said, it went right through my head. So there was something else that went right through my head. I should have wrote it down. And that's the structure. Like, I didn't create a structure to capture that thought that came. I didn't capture it, so it left, because the structure would have been to write it down. So let's go back to you, Marilyn. And if it comes back, I'll share.
Awesome. Gulashish, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of you precious, wonderful, beautiful, strong women for sharing your words. Definitely, I'm always in learning mode and always just so open to feedback, and, especially feedback that comes from such experience, and stories that you have throughout your lives. Um, One theme that keeps, all of you said this in one way or another, was personal accountability, and being responsible for ourselves. And that is definitely one of the, the concepts that has emerged through this work, is that, everyone is responsible for their own emotional energy. So, I can't, wake up this morning and feel all mad or whatever, not even really know why, and then come here and project that at you. That's not, that's not fair. It's not okay. Right. And so I love that all of you said that in one way or another, is that we're at the point where the only one that can, change this or fix this is me. Like, I can't heal people. I can't change people. But what I do have the control and capacity to change is the way that we're interacting. And through that, ability to call out and say, hey, like, I see you there. I love you, Auntie, but I'm going to ask you to stop talking to me in a way that is hurtful. Being able to do that. So we definitely, Joan, in speaking of the structure, we do have like tools and, structures and parameters that we're beginning to work in, that definitely has emerged from the people, like the people who have participated. They've really helped create this whole process, and the way that it unfolded, like the way that, and I always say that I'm telling a story or teaching, facilitating, just they're helping people, be able to say what they need to say and bring it out themselves. So they've really created, like the structure, what does revolve around that. As Indigenous people, we are accountable to our people. We're accountable to our community. We're accountable to our family. We're accountable to our nation, and so with that comes the responsibility to to do better, to be better, to always walk in this world with that notion of what I say and how I act is going to resonate forever, and so the last thing I want to do is hurt people, because we're hurt enough. We're already hurt. No one can be more hurt than our people have already been hurt. And so the last thing I want to do is ever hurt anyone. And so being very intentional, and not haphazard with my words. One of the cool things, that we learned recently is, we, like everyone, we had ceremonial practice for, rites of passage for our girls and our boys. But because I have a girl, we did it with her, Megan, who Joan knows very well as well. So she came to dance practice one day when she was like 12 and sang us a beautiful song. And so I was like, oh my God, Mom, we should do something, and then if you knew my mom, that blew up into like full blown, we're going back, we're having this old ceremony, we're out in the bush, then we're going to have a big potlatch after. And that's how my mom rolled. So anyway, through this whole process, we had to do some research, because the last one in our family that actually did the kind of the seclusion ceremony was Auntie Angela Sydney. So it had been 96 years because of residential school and being displaced from our, our culture and our ways and all of that. But what we found out is Tlingit women have labrats, right? You can see my labrat. And part of it was for kind of like their ranking within society. But the other important part was when a girl came out of this ceremony that could last anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years, an auntie from the opposite clan pierced her, gave her a labret. And a long time ago, they were like, a piece of bone or ivory or something like that. It's much bigger. And it was in there. And I read this in the, some of the, writings that people were able to capture. They did that. So the woman, the girl, understood every time she opened her mouth, because she's got this thing in there, which you can feel. My words are powerful. They can
Mm,
cause war. They could cause a war. So everything that I say needs to happen with intention,
mm,
purpose, meaning. And I need to ask myself, is this necessary? So when I
mm,
something hurtful to somebody, I need to ask myself, was that necessary? What did that accomplish? Other than I hurt somebody, right?
mm.
Anyway, there are those, like those structures that you
Actors.
about
Beautiful.
so interwoven into our culture, but today we work towards that as well. And Roxanne mentioned, having guidelines and structure before. That's another big thing that we've been working on, is that we're not going to just have a meeting with no parameters or rules, because that just opens up the door for lateral violence. Like, we need to say, this is how our meeting's going to be, or our time together, whatever we're doing. This is the structure around it. And those are based on our ancestors and how they would come together. Our rules, I hate to use the word rules, but our own teachings and guidelines form our parameters in the way that we're going to interact and be together. So those are some of the kind of structural
Cool.
measures that have emerged from the people.
Mhm. Awesome. It
Yeah.
came back. It came back. This whole
Okay.
idea, this whole idea of educating excuse me. Now I'm choking on it. Uh, this whole idea of who is responsible for educating others.
Hmm.
There is some school of thought around, like, I recently I buy audiobooks because it's a 2-hour drive to Whitehorse, so
Hmm.
I listen to my audiobooks back and forth while I'm driving. And a couple of years ago, I was led to the book White Fragility. And there are many books about systemic discrimination and stuff. But for listeners out there, like, that's a really good one. I mean, it's very confronting. I learned things about my own contribution to systemic discrimination. I learned things like, why is the thumb in Facebook, when you go to select your skin tone, why does it go from light to dark? Because
Hmm.
we're oriented in a world of the dominant world of colonization that moves from right to left to
Hmm.
right. And so good is on the left, and then bad is on the right, kind of thing. And so why doesn't it start from black and go lighter?
Hmm.
I was like,
Yes. Yeah.
wow, why doesn't it? So
Mhm.
like, it's a powerful piece of writing. And of course, there's people who don't think it is, whatever. You know, and so in that space of in that space, they talk really strongly about, it is not our responsibility to
Mhm.
educate others about who we are.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I've been re-examining that as an Indigenous woman.
Mhm.
Okay, well, that's fine. Is that really my perspective? You know,
Mhm.
um, I don't think for me that's an Indigenous perspective. Yeah, I see your charm. Like, when people came to our land, we took them under our wing and educated them in the ways that they needed so that they could survive, because we're kind
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
we see that as our responsibility.
Mhm.
So then that charm was moving her hands up and down, for those of you who are not watching, if you're listening on Spotify, like, and that's the choice piece, like, am I going to stand at the counter at Canadian Tire and Whitehorse and educate the guy there? Maybe, like, if my spirit tells me, then that's what I'm doing. But
Mhm.
if I don't get any spiritual guidance to do that, then I don't. I just get what I came to leave, and I leave, because
Right.
I used to always do the subway thing. Oh my God. I was exhausted by the end of every day in any city.
Mhm.
And so that's what the whole Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack is about.
Mhm.
I'm creating something with all of you now, in my regular individual interviews, that is there for non-Indigenous people. If they want, they can listen to our podcast, and maybe they'll learn something from listening to us today. So that's why I'm doing this. It's all volunteer. We're all volunteers here this morning. I'm not Joe Rogan yet, so there's no income here, but that's a contribution. We're all making a contribution this morning to the education of persons outside our communities, and we're probably making a contribution to the education of persons within our communities about perspectives, that there are many different perspectives. I've never done this before, but it's here because I don't want to start it up again, but I have to listen because it's here. Is there anybody who doesn't feel complete in this moment that needs to say one more thing? Okay, I see you, Charm. Go. I felt
Yeah,
that.
no, when I was doing this, I was just saying it's kind of a balance, right? It's a balance
Yeah.
because for
Yeah.
us, it's always, it's like balancing. Sometimes we are teachers, and sometimes we're learners, and sometimes it's time to speak,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. So it was more really about
Exactly.
balance. One
But
thing I was going to say, this has just been so fantastic, this whole conversation. But one thing I was going to say, something that I found really helpful is a couple of things. Is one, when we're dealing with some kind of lateral violence or whatever, is to focus on the behavior, not the person. Like you gave the
mm,
example of saying, "Auntie, I love you," but stop doing
absolutely.
that. That behavior just isn't working for me or whatever. So focusing on the behavior is important. And the two other things is consistency. Like whatever my message is, and I've had to do this with people in my life that, I've had to be able to be clear about pointing out the behavior that's problematic, how it's affecting me, and clear and consistent about I'm not here like to have a debate about it or why you did it or if you did it or anything like that. It's just to point out that when you do that, this is how it affects me. And I just thought you might want to know that. And like you say, a lot of times people are doing things unconsciously. So sometimes just pointing it out and just saying, when you're doing that behavior, this is what's happening for me, so that they have like a little raising of consciousness about what they're doing, how they're doing, and be consistent, and just let them know, like, this isn't a debate. Like, I'm not here to debate it. I'm just here to let you know how that's affecting me. And that
Mm,
was something like I had to learn, because any other way I might have dealt with things, I might not be heard. But that
mm,
way is a way that I'm more likely to be heard. And when I can say it in that way, I'm just focusing on that behavior, letting them know how it affected me, able to do it in a, like, not a defensive way, but in a calm way, that then they can hear it. They may be a little bit defensive, but I just have to remember, I'm just letting you know how it affects me. I'm not here to judge you, to tell you what to do or bugger all. I'm just letting you know what that's like for me. And that kind of way, I found that way mostly, I mean, it doesn't always work, but most of the time, not only do they hear it, but sooner or later, even if they have to go away and think about it for a while, they'll respond to it. So I think that's the thing to remember too, is that not engaging in lateral violence in terms of how I respond. So
yeah.
I use lateral kindness in my response and talk from this voice, this charm, and be consistent with that message that no, I'm not going to put up with that behavior from you. Just so you
Mm,
know, I'm not gonna allow that. You don't get to talk to me like that, or whatever it is, right?
yeah.
So,
Hmm,
consistency, calm, non-reactive, focusing on behavior. Those are just little
cool.
things I was thinking of.
Cool. Thank you. All right, let's give the last word to Marilyn. I don't know if you need a last word or not, but
Well, I just wanted to, again, just to say thank you so much, Ganeshish, to Kachuhan, and thank you, aunties and kookums, for all your brilliance. And, thank you for leading the way for our people for many, many decades. I really view our women as such strong warriors, that I know in my own family and community, they really, they have led us. And, we're now in the place where we're trying to hold everyone up and, help our men find their, rightful place back into our community. But I really acknowledge the strength of our women and, for all of your strong voices. So thank you so much for having me. And I will move on with my day with a big smile on my face and remember this time we spent together.
okay. We
Sheesh.
close every Brave Indigenous conversation talking about earrings because earrings are the staple. So, and then I do pay a guy to um, and do a little bit of work and make sure this goes up on YouTube so that it's shareable. And then he'll put in the links for whatever he hears that he can find. And so what is her name? Copper Canoe Woman, right? I think it's just coppercanoewoman.com. These I'm wearing are just ovoids, and her earrings are amazing. And Yadachtin has another pair that are the boss.
Right. These ones are actually Indie City.
Okay.
Indie City, and I love them because, well, I'm a dancer, and so we have quite bling and earrings and stuff when we're dancing. But these are, obviously they're not traditional materials, but I love that it's an ode to like the Dene part of me, the floral
Right.
motif and all of that, and they're just big and beautiful and shiny. And I thought.
And for those listening on Spotify, because we are on Spotify, how long are those earrings? They're about 10 inches, maybe a foot.
I would say they're a full 12 inches. They
must be
very big, very, very
big.
long.
Yeah. Rock star. Okay, I'm going to end our public broadcast and then we'll say goodbye privately.
Awesome.